we'll move forward from there. At lunch, we're going to try to do some fancy footwork to try to make it a little simpler and get things reset. So if you have anything on your computers before we go for lunch, please shut it down and we'll reconnect to the meeting thereafter. Okay. And with that, we'll go with fire. Chief.
Good morning, and through your worship. So like everybody else, we've gone through our budget and pulled it apart and moved stuff around. Number of increases, the same as you've heard before with insurances and fuels and things like that. So we've been certainly very cognizant of what we're doing. And as you see, there is some increases coming up. One of the things that we do have, we refuel our vehicles at the Gananoque station, County Road 32 station, number 3. We do that at Pioneer Fuels in Gananoque just because of the logistics of if we have a call in the West End, driving all the way to Lansdowne to refuel is not really very efficient. So we're looking with the Director of Public Works or Operations, we're looking at the possibility of putting another fuel tank in up at Station 3 just for diesel to help us with that. Also speaking with the fire chief in Gananoque, there was some talk at their budget deliberations about the town revamping their fuel system and opening it up for the county or OPP or EMS or us, and basically making a fuel card system. So if we're on that end of town, we can have our own system there and go to work through Gananoque. So that's very early on in discussions, but I've spoke with the Director of Operations about that as well. So we're certainly looking at how we can reduce some of those costs on that. I want to go to the next one, Megan, please. So our priorities for 2023, certification is well underway with our folks at Leeds Fire. Training of all staff's required certification is ongoing. Increases in budget due to increased requirements of training. With that, last year, did a little calculation of everybody we had in our courses. So in 18 courses of the 30 that we had at the RTC, we had 82 seats filled by firefighters from within our department. Some of them are multiple times. They've been at the training center over the last year trying to increase their certifications on the various disciplines that we have put on out there at the training center. So when we look at income for the training center, you'll see that or training budgets, you'll see that our training budget was up substantially for over what we asked for. But that was due to them going to the training center for those courses. So that worked out to about $33,000. So that was money that came out of our training budget that went back into the training center. So that just kind of bumped around there in that. So moving on. Oh, sorry. Can we go back one more? So we're looking at the review and the current method of paid on call for our firefighters. This year, it became very apparent. We had almost 348 calls this year, which is almost 60 more than last year. So it's been a very busy year for us with fire. And then with the increase in numbers, we increased the budget last year to try to accommodate where some of the changes we made on our staffing with our district chiefs and our captains, and trying to do some succession planning and get our new officers in and get them up to speed on what we're doing. But with that, and with the number of calls that we had and the amount of extra training that we did, it certainly pulled our honorarium down to about $13.68 an hour, which obviously is well below minimum wage. So I spoke with the Director of Finance and the CAO, and we've come up with a little bit of a plan, and we've got the numbers up to the minimum wage, and added 4% in vacation pay for that, so that we could start to at least get them paid at a little bit better rate. But we're going through, we have meetings coming up in January on how we're going to revamp that. And it's going to be based on certifications for our firefighters. So if you get to a certain level, you get a certain amount, and we'll just increase that. As you get to an officer, you get a little bit more. And it's basically what, looking at fire departments around the area, that's what they're doing as well. Obviously with the certification, it's not the way it was when I started, where you kind of by attrition get moved into a position. You have to qualify for those positions. So there's a lot of hours being spent out at the training center. They've got about 180 hours worth of training to get to where we need to be. We're moving very well into that direction. One of the things that has come up is sorry, I was going with a thought and I lost it there for a second. We'll go back to that. We're working to try to get those numbers up so that we can do that. Sorry, I know what it was now. The firefighters have been going to the training center on weekends throughout the last however many years that's been going there. And over the last 3 or 4 years, their wages, there was no wage for going and spending your time out there on the weekends, which now with certification, I don't think that's at all the way it needs to be. So last year we put a little bit more, which also affected my honorarium, but we gave them 2 points. They give 2 points a day. So it only worked out to about $27, unfortunately, because our numbers were so high and all the other things that we were doing. So we're working to try to get a flat rate as well. And I'm working with the director of finance on that to come up with a good plan so we can pay them for their time out there. There's lots of certification that has to happen over the next 4 years. And if we're asking that of the fire service members, we need to make sure they're being compensated for that time. They're still doing a lot of things outside of that they're not being compensated for, and they're happy to do those things like parades and open houses and things like that. But to do the actual training, to the actual calls, I think they need to be looked at and compensated properly for that in a wage that's comparable to some of the other areas that are a similar size. The other priority is the replacement of engine 20 at Station 2. So as you know, we took possession of the new engine 40 that went to Station 4, and we took old engine 40 and bumped it over to Station 2 to get us through for another year. It's due in 2024 to be replaced. And the way timelines are now, we'll need to look to order that to get that in for close to the end of 23 or into 24 is the way the timelines run for that. And on the 20-year cycle of pumps, as we spoke about the last time. So that's what will happen with that. What will happen after that is we'll take the engine 20 that's there now and we'll move that into a reserve, same as we did with the old pumper that we did that's here. It'll work to go out to the training center, so we aren't pulling trucks out of service to be doing training on weekends and extra training for us. It'll give us a pump in reserve as well with 4 frontline pumps. The possibility of something being out of service or a backup being needed or a water supply it's pretty cheap insurance to have something as a backup just in case one of our trucks fail, which does happen. Even new trucks fail. Again, Aquay had one last year where their 2017, 2018 pumper failed and it was out of service for close to 2 weeks while they were getting parts. So having something as a backup is definitely ideal for us because we can't afford to be dead in the water with nothing to respond with. Go to the next one, Megan, please. Fire service prevention education. We're working to increase fire prevention and public education activities. We have a coordination of full-time staff doing that and part-time staff doing that. I got some numbers of some of the places that we've been at. Just since October, we've visited 214 homes. Some of them we didn't get into. We've left a door hanger with a bag of materials on it so that they're up to date on what they need and what the different fire prevention and education materials. We've visited all the schools now with COVID restrictions down. We've been able to get back into the schools, back into our vulnerable occupancies and do some inspections and do some education. Working with Jesse, we've come up with our 5-year plan to try to get into as many homes as we can, using as many of the part-time staff as we can to do those. we had the CAO luckily went out with one of our firefighters in the last couple of weeks. So he got to go and do some home visits as well. So we're trying to educate our staff and let them know what's happening out there and what we're seeing. Couple of stats with it. Couple of stats is of the 214 homes, we left 27 carbon monoxide alarms in various homes and 24 smoke alarms. So we're running about 10%. 10% of our homes are not compliant currently. And of course, once we get there, if we see that they don't have those smoke alarms, we can't just leave them without anything. So we're supplying those and then hopefully getting a recoup cost. So we've been working as well to try to recoup some of those costs into 23. But once again, we can't go somewhere and find that they're not compliant and just leave the homeowner without anything at all. So we're working towards trying to come up with some better planning on that as well. We do get our smoke alarms quite cheaply through our sources, and that it helps to keep our community safe in that. 2022 revenues were increased significantly through the RTC. With a great number of attendances at the training center. We had 30 odd courses through the OFC and through our own design, as well as offsite deliveries and DZ licensing and licensing through our DCP program. We only had 2 courses that had to be canceled due to enrollment numbers. We just didn't get the numbers in. We had a couple at the beginning of the year that we had to move later on because of some of the restrictions with COVID. The fire college wasn't letting us run their courses at that time. So we just bumped those through, but we had great attendance all through. Moving into 23, we've already got our first quarter full with waiting lists on just about every one of the courses. So you're going to see a large increase over the next 3 years for sure, and then maintenance throughout, because there's, with the certification in the next 4 years, we're getting multiple calls all the time for different departments looking for those training opportunities. After 26, we also have some more advanced disciplines like the ice water rescues and the bigger rescue type courses. We'll also be having to certify for those. So we're working with various groups to try to get more of those courses designed and out the door for moving on to that. After certification, obviously now that everybody has to be certified as we bring people in, we're also certifying them before they hit the floor. So every firefighter that comes on leads fire service, which isn't really any different than any other fire service at this time. They're becoming firefighters on a probationary level, and they're hitting the floor at firefighter 1. So they've got well advanced training before they even hit the truck and hit the floor, which seems to be serving us quite well so far. So some of the projects we're working on, as I said, firefighter honorarium, we're looking at increasing that amount of money in that budget, and we're taking the last 3 years basically and finding out what our calls look like and plugging in different amounts to try to come up with what that overall cost is going to be. The honorarium and having an actual set budget is really nice for bookkeeping, because you're not going to spend any more than this. So we're trying to come up with some plans on how we can start to keep some money in the background to offset if we're higher or lower than, if we're lower than what we kind of budget, then hopefully we can put some money away to go for those years like this, where we're at 60 extra calls than last year. As I said, we do have a rising trend, and it's throughout. There's no real, I haven't looked at all of the calls to see what the trends are, but it's all over the board. We've had multiple calls for mutual aid assistance due to fire department membership dwindling all over the province. I read somewhere there was 6 years ago, there was 156,000 firefighters in Ontario, and now we're down to 114,000. So I mean, it's something that's happening all over. Retention is definitely something. Everybody says they're not in it for the money, but nobody ever turns the check down at the end of the year. So we need to be able to compensate them properly and give them just the extra bits and give them the training that they need, right? So it's a lot different than it was when I started. We don't train in the side of the road anymore. We don't roll cars into the ditch. Where I was raised on Howe Island, where I started there, we used to pull cars off the road into the ditch and do all our auto X things there. Most of our calls for this station and 3 all end up out on the 401. It'd be pretty crazy to try to do that. And now things have changed so much on the 401 that you don't even want to slow up to go to a auto X call. We went to one last week where we rode the middle of the line and we had people trying to pass us on both sides as we're trying to slow traffic down so we can get into the turnaround. So anybody who travels the 401 regularly knows how crazy it is. So we've got to train our folks how to get off a truck properly. We can't have them just jumping off the truck and into live traffic, right? So all of those things and certification will go a long way to keep our members safe as well. So some of the training and development, we've looked at increasing another 30,000 into our training and development budget line. Obviously, due to the certification amounts, we've got firefighters from our stations very invested in what's coming up in this next coming year. I've spoke with Kate a little bit and the fire college as well. One of the biggest problems we have right now is when we submit our marks, or when AS&E comes in to test, we're waiting 4 and 5 months for marks or to find out if we passed. That's not even remotely acceptable on any level. And it's probably the biggest complaint that we have as a training center and as a fire department. I just got marks back from the fire college from a course I took in October of 21. So, not really acceptable, correct? So we can buy a tabulator for about $1,400, which will help us. I've got 2 firefighters that have failed a couple of courses and they didn't find out for 5 months. Well, that's not acceptable, right? And we can't expect them to come back and they can rewrite the testing without taking the course again. But in that amount of time of waiting, they've lost whatever they retained. So we're trying to look at how we can do that. My district chief and I went to Richmond Hill a couple of weeks ago for a course, and we took it on Friday, and on Monday we had our marks. So they have a tabulator. They just run the papers through. It shouldn't be a real big deal. So we have to work with AS&E on that. So that's one of the things that have recently come up that we're looking to do. Recruitment for 2023, we're working towards that goal of 100 firefighters. We gain some, we lose some every year as things go, but we're looking to try to get to that goal of 100. Whether we can or not, I don't know. But we've put out flyers every mailbox in Leeds, Thousand Islands. Got delivered a flyer with information on it, and thanks to McKenna Modler for helping us with that, and our firefighters for stepping up and letting their pictures be put out on those forms as well. So that's what we've got coming up. Any questions?
I have Councillor Maybe, Councillor Fody, Deputy Mayor Alkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the fire chief. With the training course, with the new requirements from the province, how much more training are you doing that other departments can't do themselves?
Well, the increase is large because in order for firefighter or fire departments to do the courses, they either have to be sent out to a regional training center, or they can do what's called a learning contract. Well, their learning contract is a lot of work to get that to happen, because they've got to come up with their program. It's got to be okayed by the fire college and AS&E, and then they have to have the certified members to be able to teach it as well. So that's some of the stuff where we are having a good time at our department, our training center with, because we have those certified members to be able to go and teach those programs. What seems to be the trend right now for a lot of departments is they're looking for some offsite delivery. So in the last year, we've probably hit 5 or 6 different departments, and we're coming back around to now where Augusta and Prescott, for instance, we did some offsite delivery for them on firefighter 1 and 2 last year. Well, they want another one this year. So they're already looking at those types of things. So what happens with those, and we did one in Central Frontenac, what happens with those is instead of their members coming in and depleting their numbers out of their stations in, say, Central Frontenac, we send 2 instructors every time up to train there. So we're only short 2 on this end. They're not short 20 or 25 in that end, right? So, and then they'll come back to the training center for practical testing and examination and using our burn units then. So that's it's kind of a balancing act. And I've talked to lots of fire departments that are looking at how they can manage that. And the learning contract's a great idea, but they've got to also have the staff to be able to teach that.
Councillor Fody, then Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the fire chief. I know I reached out to you a few weeks back when I started receiving a few phone calls. The message that the calculation being used for paying our firefighters that you alluded to is being changed. Has that message gotten out to all the firefighters so we don't lose any currently?
Yeah, so yes, through your worship. Yes. I've spoke with the district chiefs and the station captains and said, we understand this is something that was set up well before I came, and it's been kind of in place for a long time. But we haven't had the training that we've been getting over the last couple of years or over the last year, and we haven't had the calls. So we've put that out to the officers to say, like, get this out to your members. And, this number of 1368 was very low. So, we've gone to our management team to say, how can we come up with a better way to get this number up to, at the very least, get us to minimum wage. And then moving into next year, how we're kind of giving them the idea of how we're moving forward on that with our numbers.
Okay, I have a couple of follow-up questions, if I may. With regards to the 180 hours that the firefighters are required, is there a generalization? Does it vary on our complete department? Are we lacking in a number of that? Or is this new, some of it, and every firefighter is required? I'm just wondering where we stand as a total fire department volunteer level for this 180 hours.
Through your worship. So a little bit of history, there was grandfathering put into place years ago. So certain courses, and depending on the amount of education or training courses you took and your years of service and fire calls, you got grandfathered into certain parts of the NFPA. And so myself, I got grandfathered into Fire 1 and Fire 2, an instructor and an officer, because I had been through all those training courses and had the years experience. When grandfathering first happened, there was a large group of firefighters that were grandfathered into certain things. And then over that time, that was way back about Wayne Shields did it. So it was back in 2004 and 5, somewhere around, was when grandfathering first started. There was another grandfathering opened up 2014, 15, 16, somewhere in that area. And nobody at that time was grandfathered into anything with leads. Looking back on it, there's lots of departments that aren't even following the grandfathering anymore. They're making even those members that have been there for a long time take all these courses and get certified, because things you learned 20 years ago, fires changes. One of the things we're learning is when we go into structure fires, we don't have old couches that are made of hair and cotton anymore. We've got 5 gallons of gasoline from IKEA sitting there, right? So that the fire release rate on all of these things has changed so much, and fires burn so much differently. We want to try to get as many back through that. So even with our grandfathering, we're going to be putting some of our grandfathered folks back through some of these courses just to try to do that. But as a fire department as a whole, we have about 40 that need the Fire 2. Our officer numbers are actually pretty good. Fire 1s, we're working on trying to get everybody through that as we can. But we've set different levels for different levels for our officers and our captains as well. And everybody's not too bad. We're actually in pretty decent shape for 80 some people.
Okay, my final question. Under your command, you restructured the authority, if you will, of the current fire membership, like district chiefs, captains, lieutenants and such, and it's impacted the budget a bit. Has this played out the way you've anticipated?
Overall, yes, it's played out pretty well. The district chief position is definitely something that we're working on, because we had job descriptions for it, but it's kind of morphed into its own sort of thing, where we've got a district chief that basically takes care of all the training for our 4 stations. And he takes care of all of that, as well as trying to organize the things throughout on the north end. Our district chief in the south end has taken on more equipment wise and basically this end. A few of the things that we've come, one of the budget lines that's increased a lot from the past was things as easy as our fire or bunker gear being cleaned. There's a standard that bunker gear needed to be cleaned and hydrostatically tested once a year. It wasn't, the only times our gear was going out was when it was dirty. So if Councillor Lackey was one of our firefighters and he was one of our active guys and his gear went out 4 times and got cleaned, it was compliant because it was within the year. But if we had another firefighter that didn't make it into a structure fire or didn't have as much activity, their gear didn't get into the rotation of doing that. So we've got a little bit better system now where we're starting to rotate that all through, and that's where we're using our districts to do those kinds of things as well, and cover for me in the times that I'm not around.
Okay, thank you.
I have Deputy Mayor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Could we see your first slide again? The bottom line slides. Yes. One of the things that I keep hearing from people is that the fire training center was supposed to make money. And somebody somewhere sometime convinced people that the fire training center would generate revenue. Well, it looks like it does, but only about 10% of the expenses. That's, I think, a very important thing to state up front about it. It does cost the township, does cost a taxpayer to run the fire service. It costs less to run the fire service because you don't have to send people per DMs to get the training. And the profit really is in having a first-class fire service. I just wanted to state that for some of my listening audience who are often upset that there isn't a profit line from the fire service. That's not what you're there for.
And through your worship, yes. And honestly, looking at what course revenue this year has come in at 137,000, which is much higher than what we anticipated last year. And we budgeted again this year to be somewhere around 95,000 again. We're obviously a little low on what our estimate is based on what we've got, but we're trying to build that group up to get to that. So one of the things we do have is right off the hop, we've got a mortgage on that facility for another 8 or 9 years, I believe now. So we got that right off the top. So we're trying to get that kind of brought down. Our net revenue this year worked out to about 64,000. So we've got to look at how all of that plays out at the very end of the day, but we're certainly closer to the zero end of, or plus a little bit this year based on what last year's or this 2022's looked like.
And one supplemental. I understand that the fire marshal says you can only invoice for cost. There's no profit per se built into any invoice you put out when you train other people.
And through your worship, that's definitely a bit of a challenge. Like you'll see on some of the spots where it shows for instructor wages and meals. All of those are covered through the applications that we have and through our pricing, with a very little bit of profit put into that so that we can start to look at putting some money into some of our props. One of the things that we're working on is new live fire Class A cans, where we can use those for the training center, but as well our own training, right? So, but all of that costs money. we don't get any help from the province on that. Really, the only money that we get, the only thing that we really get through the OFC is they pay for the instructor wages on OFC courses. So if I teach a course, the OFC pays me. So we have that built into our pay. So that kind of becomes our profit on that. But anything else is, there's no extra help out there.
Councillor Lackey and then Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship, to the chief. Have we ever sat down and worked with percentages as far as the use of the building? I know we constantly call it the Fire Training Center, but it's also our Station 4, as well as we keep some public works equipment out there as well. So have we broken that away so that we have a true fire training and a true Station 4 as far as expenses?
I can have the treasurer answer that unless you have the answer.
Well, I have part of the answer, and through Your Worship, I've worked with the Director of Finance on this, and we're pulling those pieces out. We did separate some of the mortgage out of the Fire Training Center portion and move some of it to the fire department side or the Station 4 side as well. But we're also looking at how we, my fire prevention / offsite coordinator, his wages all come out of fire prevention. But we're looking at how we move that around to make it more honest, true towards what we're looking at on the budget as well. So that we're working on pulling that out and getting a finer idea on that.
Because that will improve the numbers for the fire training.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think
Answer
that's
that
probably
okay?
sufficient at this point, unless there's anything you want to add, Madam Treasurer.
Through Your Worship, just I guess a couple conversations Mike and I have been having on this, and to really get a full cost understanding for the training center, there is some more work we need to do to make sure that we're allocating applicable overhead costs and staffing costs, like the fire prevention position, which is fire prevention / training center. So some of those costs aren't fully allocated there yet, but
Working on it.
Right.
Okay, Councillor Jameson.
You mentioned, Chief, Your Worship, through Your Worship, that your calls have increased. Are there trends? I mean, I'm thinking back to the discussion we had at MDS a few months ago. Are you seeing trends? I mean, suppression is not the only thing you're doing. So what's the trend? Are there any, and what do you think you're going to have to do?
Through Your Worship, not seeing any actual trending of anything in particular, but as we discussed at MDS, our medical calls are definitely up. Our overdose calls are up. We have a number of different aspects that we run through on medical, and the fire call, as far as actual fires, fire alarms, auto X calls, it's really all over the board. Honestly, we're going to sit down when we get all of the numbers in and see what the big ones are, but a larger number of fires this year, again, not necessarily structural, but car fires and fires in general have been up, and that seems to be, in speaking with other municipalities, it's a very similar trend around. All numbers are up.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? Seeing none, thank you, Fire Chief. We are going to break for lunch. It is 10 after 12. I would like to be back here at 12:45 to start on the additional departmental items, which would be planning, development, and operations and infrastructure to round out the operation budget, and then we'll be moving on into capital. Okay, so back at 12:45.